So what is the universe and how did we end up in it? Basically, as human beings, we plan our events, and so much that we buy special clothes for certain events. And no one has ever been to a funeral wearing their pajamas. And so if you would find yourself in a certain location and you don't know how you planned or got yourself into it, or a certain location, would you still consider yourself normal, or do you say that there has been a lapse of consciousness and that you will have to rethink as to how you got yourself into that particular location or place? So in the case of us human beings being here on this universe and having two eyes, two nostrils, two ears, etc., and yet living in a single three-dimensional reality, how do we explain that to ourselves? We all know that the mirror is supposed to reflect us whenever we show ourselves or anything in front of it. So what about us having two ears, two nostrils, and two arms, etc.? Doesn't that tell us that one aspect of ourselves is a reflection of the other? In other words, that our physical world is nothing more than a mirror of many other worlds, or one particular world. And we also know that mirrors are designed and for that same purpose of reflection. And so in our case, we can also conclude that our universe was designed to reflect conditions or events happening in higher dimensions. So how did the universe came into being? And why must we care about such information? Because if one does not know who they are, where they come from, and where they are headed, it becomes easily for them to be hijacked by just about anyone who offers to have answers. And so in our case, we have different races in this world, and we black people are the original race. And yet to find ourselves being dependent on these white people for religion, as well as their scientific interpretations of how life began. Because without knowing why we exist, how we exist, and where we exist, then we have suddenly lost the value of who we are and why we're in this world. And so according to 360 degrees, an African spiritual system, the universe was created by 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods. And this 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods had descended from the previous universe, which came to an end. And in fact, actually, every universe follows another in the same manner that every plant has a seed in order for it to be recreated whenever it's planted again. Meaning that human beings are born from human beings, and everything else comes from that which it is made up of. So in the same manner as the universe is made up of particles, and when the universe comes to an end, actually the 1,000,008,000,000 gods go through what is known as divine unity. This is when they discover that the next person is the other, so much that they can exchange their consciousness. By that I'm trying to refer to the fact that they can transform their consciousness from one body to the next until life becomes an illusion. And when this happens, they see beyond the illusion of the confinements of the matrix, the bigger matrix that is, which they have created themselves. Once they see through it, they ascend as conscious spirits because they become one. And this one entity is the one we know as God or Adonai El. And another universe will be proposed for a particular purpose. And once it's finally proposed and it's ready for creation, this same 1,000,008,000,000 gods will ascend as one body, which will divide itself from 1 to 2 to 3, 7, 12, until ultimately until it's 1,000,008,000,000 beings or bodies. And they would meditate, create the rest of the universe by meditating on a particular location in the heavens or the skies, the dark sky. Actually, what would happen at the end of the previous universe is that the type 100 star systems, meaning the 100 planets which are orbiting a single sun, would have their suns collided together, followed by their planets. Then the 99 type planets would follow, and then the numbers would reduce themselves until the one type planets, that is the planet which was a single planet orbiting a single sun, would ultimately follow. When this happens, the entire universe becomes the size of the Earth, and all its particles form what we all know today as the periodic table. And this periodic table becomes a template for how the universe is organized, or what happens when it comes to an end, that it collides into one planet. And so when these 1,000,008,000,000 gods descend, as 1,000,008,000,000, they would meditate on a chosen spot on the sky and create. First, they would create their magnetic sun, which when it hits its light hits their planet, it would start thus the rotation of that planet, and thus giving them the first measurements of time. And so they will also continue by meditating on other, in fact, they will divide the universe into 12 zones. And these 12 zones will have 7 tiers. The 7 tiers will be in cycles from the origin or the point of creation. And the 12 zones will be considered the constellations. And those will determine the times of the galaxies as they revolve around the central star. And the central star being the star Sirius, which was worshipped by ancient Egyptians, and the Dogons of Mali and many other Western African countries are very familiar with. So much that they teach that we came from that star system, same as 360 degrees, by the way. And so we explained the creation of the universe, and we're saying that 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods divided themselves into 7,000 groups, made up of 144,000 men and women, 72,000 men and 72,000 women. And they each meditated for a period of 6,000 years, resting for 1,000 years. And they would create their galaxies by meditating on a given location. And these would be spread or within the 12 zones or 12 7 tiers to avoid collisions. Ultimately, every star system or galaxy will have solar systems. The solar systems will form as the sun starts to form and emits. Basically, the universe is made up of 7 elements, those being electromagnetism, or as well as electricity, light, ether, gases, solids, as well as liquids, but not necessarily in their form. But as the sun forms, it takes the entire spectrum of that's just what I've explained, and ultimately it spits out gases, liquids, as well as solids, and this ultimately become the sun's planets, and thus becoming a circuit called the solar system. And so our Earth came into being as a particle emitted by the sun, but what gave it life was the distance as well as the availability of water as well as gases. And so the 1,000,008,000,000 gods would send settlers, 144,000 settlers, to each star system they've created as soon as it matures. And the same thing happened with our Earth. And after they came here, they settled this Earth for trillions of years until time came for them to descend in consciousness in order to become human beings and create different races out of us black people, such as the old scriptural sayings, let us make men in our image and likeness. And so what this explains is that the universe is conceived by consciousness and has to be maintained by observation or intelligent beings. But when you surrender that authority of detailing as to why we exist and how to a race which has been created and does not fully understand this and or have a higher interest on this, you are thus creating a situation whereby the farmer is now being kept hostage by the animals in which he is supposed to be farming or owning. So what this ultimately explains is that blacks created the universe, and blacks having melanin have the means to control the duration as well as the progression of the universe, because they are the ones who created in the first place as gods, and they've descended into human beings. And after every 6,000 years, there's always a requirement for about 104,000 judges to help the universe reach its goal of creation. And so it has been 6,000 years ever since we created different races in our image and likeness, meaning that even according to the Bible, it will be required that 104,000 chosen ones will arise using eternal knowledge, not the knowledge we're given at school, which prepares us for work, but eternal knowledge which remains relevant in every dimension or existence, whether we are sleeping and dreaming or awaken or in higher dimensions after opening a pineal gland, because realities are such that we perceive the physical world with our five physical senses, whereas there are many infinite worlds which we can perceive with our 7 spiritual senses which are within us, and the gateway being the pineal gland. And this pineal gland governs our wake and sleeping patterns. And the universe's current energy levels are at 13 hertz per second, meaning that at this level we are supposed to awaken spiritually to help the universe reach its next stage of progression. Given that we fail to do this, our sun will return back to what is known as a black hole. A black hole is what forms when the sun is forming, because the sun is a cluster of electrons, and these electrons are positive as well as it's a cluster of atoms, and atoms contains electrons which are negatively charged as well as protons which are positively charged. As these collide, they form heat, and this heat eventually gives the color red, yellow, and the entire spectrum of light. Now, given that we wouldn't encounter or play according to the rules, or we're ignorant of this knowledge, because we've created artificial intelligence in the form of the covenant as well as the pyramids of Giza to help harvest external spiritual energies or electromagnetic energy to help life progress in this planet. So we human beings have become a liability ever since we have lost our higher consciousness. Now, given that we wouldn't waken up at the right time, the Earth would suddenly, together with its own, with other galaxies, planets, would be swallowed by the sun as it returns back into a black hole. And this will ultimately become what is known as a supernova, where the sun would shrink these planets and split them on both directions. And so what this means is that life is intelligence. And without intelligence, life comes to an end. And it's about time for us black people to stop learning everything from whites and start determining our own destiny as a race, because we're the ones who created everyone else, and we're the ones who are the manifestations of God. And for us not to know who we are, where we come from, places us in a position of vulnerability as well as exploitation by religions, governments, and many of these institutions. So it's about time that we change and figure out who we are and work according to that, which is our strength. And I thank you for your time again.